All right, welcome to the Sumer Sports Show. We're here to review Week 10 of the NFL season. We're more than halfway. We can definitively say that now. Thomas, how you doing today?
I'm blown away by the weekend. I love the excitement. Every time I turn around, there's something that's going awry, right? With the games. And I'm sorry, someone just called through. I don't know how that came onto my our podcast. But Nick Polk, by the way, from Athletes First, one of the best out there at his job, is trying to call me. Nick, you probably hear me, but I'm on a podcast with Eric Eager, so it'll have to be another time. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad that, that's a high honor given, Nick was your salary cap guy for all those years in Atlanta and obviously has probably something insightful to say to you. And we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait a few minutes as we review Week 10. I honestly think, here's Thomas. I know that, inside the chat, you don't have necessarily the power to put this up here, but I do think that this is interesting. Wingham, 513. 513, I think, is in reference to my old stomping grounds of Cincinnati. Sports hurt my soul sometimes. Is Harbaugh an issue? It is funny, and let's skip up because I know this is a team near and dear to your heart, the Cleveland Browns, one of the teams you used to work for and a team you grew up rooting for, and the Baltimore Ravens, who were once the Cleveland Browns, and then obviously now are their own franchise. John Harbaugh, Super Bowl winning coach. Yesterday, so through 10 games, the Baltimore Ravens have trailed for the third fewest minutes in the history of the NFL. The other four teams in the top five through 10 weeks were all 10-0. This Baltimore team, Thomas, is 7-3 after a crushing defeat yesterday at the hands of Cleveland at home, which again is another one. I remember texting you about this. I think it was week 5 when they were up like 10-3 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I remember messaging you. I go, they F around and lose this game 4 times a year. Well, now we're at 3 games. And it's they had the Colts game, which was at home, and Gardner Minshew, back at quarterback, goes ahead and beats them. This team gets beat yesterday. And I worry, Thomas, because we talked about on the Wednesday pod how many truly elite people that organization has in it, from Harbaugh to Eric DeCosta, all the way down to the analytics people, to the cap people, to assistant coaches. They're a great franchise in the NFL. And yet, Thomas, when we think about who's representing the AFC in the Super Bowl every year, it's Kansas City, it's Cincinnati in their own division, a team that I think many people would say is inferior to Baltimore in many ways, makes the Super Bowl. Obviously, New England, et cetera, et cetera. We have not seen a Baltimore team in the conference championship since 2012, the last time they were in the Super Bowl. And, they haven't been in a Super Bowl since then. Is there a concern with Baltimore that they're kind of one of those always like a day late and a dollar short teams when it comes to truly taking that next step and being an elite team in the AFC?
I don't personally believe so. I know what you're saying, and it's tough for some people to argue against it, but I would say this. We had a conversation a little bit earlier. I know you said you didn't want to go in this direction. John Harbaugh is one of the coaches out there that I categorically would consider trading a first-round pick for. Some people may argue that at certain levels, not for any other reason, because it's a big decision to make. Right? When you're talking about trading talent, this league, the more I'm in it, the more I realize you have to fit everyone in the right places. But he is a hell of a coach, and he has a really good understanding of leading. You also have a GM in Eric DeCosta. You have a data team. It is so well-rounded in so many ways. Why they come up short, it's tough to say. I mean, I want to throw it back to you a little bit because statistically, is there something that stands out in all of our analytics that would suggest why that is? Because I would be very interested to know.
Yeah, so going to sumersports.com, I'm gonna actually pitch an article that I wrote this weekend because it actually has John Harbaugh as the cover guy. But I went through and actually built, Thomas, what's called a mix effect model, which basically I was trying to determine how valuable a coach is to the point spread during the course after adjusting for the team strength and quarterback strength and all that stuff. And going back to 1999, which is as far back as we have the market data and the coaching data game to game, John Harbaugh is second in the NFL, worth about 1.37 points to the point spread, which it's interesting because I've shown you this work and you've always been like, that seems low. And I've shown other people work and they're like, that seems high. We'll Goldilocks this, right? But like Harbaugh has meant more to the point spread since the beginning of the millennium than all but just Bill Belichick, who I think we've all agree is the best coach of all time. When you look at this list, there's not that much you can really scoff at. I mean, Brian Billick won a Super Bowl with Trent Dilfer as his quarterback. Bruce Arians obviously won a Super Bowl as well, resurrected the career of Carson Palmer. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl. Bill Cowher won a Super Bowl. Dick Vermeil won a Super Bowl with the Rams, Thomas. The NFL record for the unlikeliest Super Bowl, that 1999 Rams team with Kurt Warner was 150-1 to win the Super Bowl when the season started. And, we always talk positively, but here are the active guys. And again, Harbaugh, when you look at it per game, means about as much to his team as anybody. So I agree with you. And I think when you think about a list of like guys who you would trade for, I think age you have to factor in with some of these guys. Harbaugh's still young. That would matter to me, but I absolutely agree with you. As far as looking at what could be going wrong with the Ravens, sumersports.com/players/quarterbacks. I always start to look at where the quarterback position is. And I find it interesting, Thomas, that Lamar Jackson, of all people, when you look at total expected points, the one thing that's really interesting is that when you look at his rushing expected points, he's only added a little under a touchdown running the football. And when you look at the rushing yards by quarterbacks, he's obviously tops, but he's not going to rush for 1,200 yards the way that he has historically. And I think that that's a big deal. I think that the fact is the quarterback play, I think, has been better than in the past for Jackson. But there are games like yesterday where they need to buy a basket in the second half of the game, and he simply can't do it. And that doesn't mean I don't think he's very good. What it means is that I think that they are simply him stepping up and playing better football away from sort of achieving their goals.
I could concur. Where are we going with this now, though? Like, I want to make sure I'm staying online for you here.
Well, I mean, let's just keep talking about that game. Like a big win for Stefanski, right? Big win for Kevin Stefanski and his Browns team. Deshaun Watson is in a walking boot, from what I can tell. They host Pittsburgh this week as 3.5-point favorites. So again, it's sort of classic Brown stuff where you sort of feel like you're getting over the hump. You're 6-3. People should be positive about you, but now the quarterback, the high price guy who has played pretty good football the last 2 weeks, let's be honest about it, hasn't played that well down the stretch. Now he's banged up, right? And so I think when I look at this game, I just think the AFC is a lot flatter than we want to believe it, right? The Ravens are not this juggernaut that we thought that they were. The Browns are nipping at their heels. And then yesterday, and I want to talk briefly because we had this on our sheet, and let's transition to this game. Cincinnati was taken down by Houston yesterday at home. A quarterback in C.J. Stroud who I think should be getting MVP votes at this point, given how much he's resurrected that team. And we look back, and again, let's talk about this for a brief second. Talk about coaching. 4 head coaches, if you count the last year of Bill O'Brien. 4 head coaches in 4 years for Houston. Nick Caserio finally finds the right guy in DeMeco Ryans, it appears. That game had a little bit of everything, Thomas, from the Stroud performance to the Bengals kind of melting down to what this means now in the AFC, where Houston is currently hanging on to the 7th seed and would be in the playoffs if the season ended today.
So, D'Amico, it's good to see that going on. It's good to see that he and Nick Caserio are working well. Man, I've said this to you on air and off air. I'm never one that wants to jump in right away and laud everyone like they have the answer and D'Amico is the answer right away. It's very young in the game, right? They're 4-4 now, right?
5-4, yeah.
5-4, excuse me, 5-4. Everyone's talking about our opportunity to get in the playoffs. Who knows why? Good guy. Players really love playing for him because it's not necessary categorically like the answer, right? It's early and it's young. What I like more than anything, putting Nick Caserio aside and D'Amico Ryans aside, let's talk about the quarterback. I've mentioned this before. Let's talk about Bobby Slowick. Let's talk about how you take a quarterback like this, that even one of the hot businesses, S2, and this is going to be interesting. One day we should get them on Sumer Sports to talk to us for 15 minutes. I wonder if they would do that, because I like the guys. And you can't just judge someone off of one deal, but there's a lot of people that are throwing darts, right, at them saying.
And I don't know if the darts are necessarily fair. A couple people I talked to in the league. Now, again, cognition tests are tough. Sure. Knowing people who work in that field professionally, the signal you're going to get is weak. The signal you're going to get, you sent me this message from Peter King, who I respect greatly, a legend of the game. He talks about we're terrible at evaluating quarterback play, right? Like I think we do a good job of elimination, right? But we don't have that many sins of omission. There aren't guys who are like Dak Prescott, who are 4th round picks that come in and are good starters. But the sins of commission that we have at the position are huge, right? Trading $200 million in assets to basically flip a coin between Young and Stroud that can be a franchise crushing move at times. And yet in some cases, when it's Patrick Mahomes or when it's Deshaun Watson or when it can be a great move. And so and so I'm going to be like, look, there are jokes you can make, right? Houston won by S2 today and all this there are tons of jokes you can make. But the fact of the matter is there are a lot of reasons he could have done poorly on this test. Not the least of which could have been he might not have even tried on it, right? If you're the favorite at the combine to be the first overall pick, what are your incentives to go out and ace this test, right? Like we've all gotten there are plenty of things that could be separate from his score on the test that could be a signal to us of how intelligent he was.
So, yeah, look, this comes back to me. It's totally on the team builders, the head coach and the GM, to put your quarterback in the right spot so they can be as successful as possible, right? To me, I told you this. In that earlier game in the season when the Texans played the Falcons, I thought they were just slapping it around. To be honest with you, not slap, that's not fair. I thought better way to put that, to be honest. I thought they were playing very conservatively and they were just happy. Remember, on and off air, I said, I'm just agitated that they didn't just come, pin their ears back, and play with some aggressiveness. And I felt they were just trying to play not to get sacked. But remember, a lot of us, when you're putting together a team, you get your new quarterback there. 8 games in is right where the situation is, right? Let's kick into gear. And we're watching him kick it into gear, which I think is obviously very, very positive. Those are big time numbers the last 2 games. Now, okay, what was the rankings of their last 2 opponents on defense? Can you pull that up quickly?
Yeah, so we'll go ahead here and we'll go to let's get back on the saddle here. We should probably just have the stats page up, but we know people listen in other places. But if you go to teams here for us here, you go to defense. So yeah, they played Tampa Bay. So when you look at worst defenses, Tampa Bay, although they had a pretty good effort the other day, yesterday against Tennessee, against a rookie quarterback, Tampa Bay is in the top half of the league in terms of EPA per play. But again, you're at home, you're inside. Tampa Bay had some injuries. I know Davis as well as Dean have both been banged up. So, not quite as good of an effort. But then yesterday, when you're looking at who they're facing in Cincinnati, Cincinnati's had a down year defensively. They're 20th or so. And a lot of that, I know you're a big fan of Jesse Bates. He came over here to Atlanta from Cincinnati. Von Bell is a veteran safety who's now playing for Carolina. They've had, Sam Hubbard, I believe, missed yesterday's game as a pass rusher. But yeah, and when, to your point, I think the tricky part, and this goes back to, sort of the Mac Jones thing. I think we have to be careful with distinguishing what is encouraging from a young quarterback versus what is truly being good, right? If you like, I think that Baker Mayfield this year has been encouraging. I don't think he's good, Thomas. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think he's played really well for him. And yet, like, does that mean I'm going to back up the truck and pay him a veteran contract as a result of this? Probably not. Mac Jones in 2021, Thomas, was encouraging. That doesn't mean he's good, right? Or that doesn't mean he's out of the woods yet. Sam Howell's encouraging this year. It doesn't mean he's good. I think Stroud, you know, when you look at this league and like notice here, Thomas, total EPA, he's 6th in the NFL behind just Jalen Hurts, Dak Prescott, Patrick Mahomes, Brock Purdy, and Josh Allen. You do have to do a little bit of like, okay, how much of this is the offense generating this and how much of it is the quarterback generating this? I think I'm interested because one thing to look at that's really interesting, if you look among the top 6 quarterbacks, Thomas, Stroud has the lowest completion percentage by a lot.
Yep.
He has the highest average depth of target by a lot. Not by a lot, but by, you know, a decent amount. So what that means is this is a home run hitter, right? In baseball, this would be like Greg Vaughn hitting 219 but hitting 35 home runs. Eventually, that you want, some quarterbacks, I think like Dak Prescott is more like Tony Gwynn. He's hitting singles through the left side of the infield all the entire time. So the question is this sustainable? I do think that there are markers in his data, Thomas, that make me a little less bullish on whether he can sustain being a downfield, low completion percentage guy.
Look, I saw some plays. I saw some moving around, which he can do. Remember, at Ohio State, they were always saying he should run more, and what is his true ability? He has legitimate ability and versatility, right? I loved him moving around yesterday, darting some throws, which I thought were really impressive. Look, I like the kid a lot. We don't have to get into this, but I mean, you know what my head was on the quarterbacks coming into this past draft, and it'll be interesting to see how they all play out. You could lead into to Levis, for instance, right? Everyone was going crazy off of one game against Atlanta. And I feel it's unfortunate on both sides, right? I think then you start building up all of a sudden you build up these crazy expectations where it was drilled into my head forever by Bill Belichick and Scott Pioli. Keep everything in perspective. And you have to do that. As a fan base, media, you don't. But, right now, just keep it in perspective that he's making some good moves. He's not necessarily the answer of the answer. And everyone else, have crapped down their legs with their quarterback. It's not fair. There's some good quarterbacks out there that will have time to grow. And in time, it's not 8 games. It's 3 and 4 years to truly determine what these guys are. That's what I want to keep.
Yeah, for sure. I think that, no, you're 100% right. And I think you even look back at that 2021 draft, which I talked about. If you would have taken inventory after the first year, you would have said Mac Jones is the most productive of this group, followed by, then it was Lawrence, who had just dealt with the Urban Meyer year. Zach Wilson was a disaster. Trey Lance barely played, and Jordan Love barely played, or Jordan Love was the previous draft. But you look and you mix that thing up. Or 2 years ago, it was like Tua was terrible, and Justin Herbert was the best thing since sliced bread. And, they've converged a little bit, not completely. Herbert's, I think, still better. But, it's to your point. And one thing I do think is encouraging about Houston is the size of their injury report going into the game in Cincinnati was huge. And I do and I know you felt this way about Matt Ryan, and obviously Brady was this way in spades, but any guy that can overcome perturbations to the roster just makes everybody around them better, including the GM, including the coach, including the receivers. And you look at a guy like Noah Brown, who one of the most productive players in football, could barely get on the field for Dallas for a few years there. And so I do think that that's a good, when those quarterbacks, when you can make excuses for them, but you don't have to because they're being productive despite some injuries. I really like that. Let's talk a little bit about the London game, or sorry, not the London game. It's the Frankfurt, Germany game, the Colts versus the New England Patriots. And again, I talk about Mac Jones because I'm wondering what the hell happened to Mac Jones. I as a rookie, talking about really good, above expectation play. Now you're talking about a guy who's getting benched for ineffective play for Bailey Zappi. I do think that this is another thing where everybody wants to bag on Josh McDaniels for his time, both with Denver, but now most recently with Vegas. Josh McDaniel had Mac Jones playing good football before he left. And I wonder, what is necessary to get Mac Jones back on track, because I just think that, he's really holding the Patriots back to a certain extent. And it's kind of it's bubbling up a lot of questions about obviously Bill and they just cut Jack Jones, who's also the COO of Sumer. But they cut one of their picks from last year, like a mid-round pick. I think things in New England are really dicey right now. And I think it starts with the quarterback play.
Man, I mean, you can't get away from this. I don't know about you. The energy, dicey, jittery, right? I don't like seeing jittery quarterbacks. And there are reasons. Sometimes it's coming off of injuries. Sometimes it's coming off of a bad stretch. Like golfers, they get the yips in their own way. He feels yippy beyond. And I did like him coming out. I thought Josh McDaniel did a really good job with putting him right down the line to accentuate his positives and curtail some of his challenges. I watch him now. Of course, he and Bill ostensibly aren't getting along. Well, I don't know, who knows what it is. But watching Bill O'Brien on the sideline, laying into him, I saw him take a deep breath after. I saw him, I'm talking about, Mac.
Yeah.
He leaned back and he just took a big sigh after he got benched. I'm just thinking he's a mess.
You remember the Vikings team in the late 90s. I was a kid, and Randall Cunningham came off the bench and won an MVP basically, right? And then they lose. And the next year, Randall was so bad that they had to sit him down for Jeff George. And Jeff George took him to the playoffs and all the stuff. And it was honestly Dennis Green's best trait was to be able to win games with the backup quarterback. But I remember, and I'll never forget what Randall Cunningham said when they benched him. He said, "I actually feel a level of relief now." And you wonder about these people, and it's the same thing. You think about obviously all the pressure that you were under as general manager of the Falcons, and all the pressure Dan must have been under as the head coach, and Matt, and you think about for some of those guys, the pressure is just getting there. And you think about with Mac Jones, it's does he have the facilities to overcome that pressure, or does he need to go back? Do they need to go back into a place where less is expected of him, like he was when he was a rookie? But yeah, exactly. Exactly. When he sat down, he was just and you could see it. He was hyperventilating, and just getting him out of the game just probably was good for his health in general. But it does. And maybe from a team building standpoint, you can kind of expound on this. This is something you do want to measure, or you do want to figure out is if you play at Alabama, you lose 2 or 3 games your whole career. And then you go to a team like New England and you lose that many games in a month. How able are you to adapt to that?
It's a big point. And you're right, those big programs like that. So let's circle back. If you can dig into your college knowledge right now, go figure. Caleb Williams, how many wins does he have this year?
I think they're at 5 or 6, but to your point, they've lost some pretty high profile games.
And so we love those guys who run it, right? They run it and they're great. But to your point, the people that don't know how to lose and recover and jump back up, that's a positive too, right? Again, it sounds odd because you want someone to be undefeated but the people that don't, I mean, the part of that leadership, look, I say to people all the time, it's not the gun. It's not, it's let's start with the ability to communicate and lead, right? Yep. Which is vital. Let's talk about, accuracy and all the other stuff, the avoiding of the sack and the presence and the awareness, of course, all of that great stuff. But if you're not a leader and you don't know how to recover from getting your ass beaten, get back up, make a big time throw, take the beating, and not sulk, because when I hear people say, I've never lost in my 17 years since high school, I'm okay.
Well,
that's only.
Well, to your point, look at Texas Tech Red Raiders. 2014 was Mahomes' sophomore year, 4-8, 2-7 in conference. And they were 7-6 and 5-7 in his final 2 years. I don't know if you know this about me, but my freshman year in college, we were 0-11. I we were, by the time we were finished, we were 6-5, and I think 4-7 my final year. Like, there's signal, I think, in going from, to the point of Mahomes, is going from a 4-win team to a 7-win team. I think that there's actually in a college football realm where you can elevate a team without that many great players. There is some signal to that, to your point. And I do wonder, and it was funny because last Saturday, so not this Saturday, but last Saturday, Caleb Williams, there was like a story about him going over to his mother and hugging her and everything in the stands. And people were talking about whether that was, and I'm just like, it's so interesting to think about how much these guys are going through on a week-to-week basis that, there is like an element of regulation. I always like to say, we're both, obviously you run things at Sumer and I, I'm on leadership, but I always think, like, when I was in high school, I was like a star on the football team and I was like a bench player on the basketball team, and having like both different points of view is like actually really good in life, right? Being able to understand what it's like to be the top dog and have everybody depend on you, and understanding what it's like to be a supporting person.
Yeah.
There's value there, right? And I think that, or with Caleb Williams, it's like there's value in having expectations that are high, like last year. And then this year where expectations aren't quite as high, but you're trying to overcome them and you're playing teams that are better than you. Like, I do think that the shock of the NFL season is going to be less onerous on the Drake Mays, right? They almost lost that game the other day, and the Caleb Williams, because they have to overcome things that are not winning all 12 games every regular season.
You asked me earlier, and we kind of jumped away from it a little bit, but back to Atlanta and back and obviously back to Arizona, and talking about quarterbacks and the ongoing discussion this year about, okay, all right, there's Arthur Smith in another precarious situation, right? All of a sudden Heineke gets injured. You put back Desmond Ridder, and he's doing what he has to do. I mean, how complicated is that for Coach Smith to deal with not getting the first down and falling? I mean, it's a small thing, but everyone's going to pile on with that, right? That could happen to anyone. Do you kick that? Do you run it? I mean, statistically, do you know what it read? What did your data aficionados state in that?
So you're talking about the Trey McBride catch?
No, I'm talking about when Desmond Ridder fell on his first down.
On the 4th and 1, when he was trying to do a sneak and just like slipped down. Well, I know that stadium, like, again, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this as hopefully as nurturing as I can. We all saw the Super Bowl that happened in that stadium. People slip all over the place in that stadium. I think that they were unprepared for that, and their backup quarterback not having the right cleats or whatever is a huge part of just like, are you doing the 10 out of 10 thing? Bill Belichick's team would have the right cleats on in a situation like that. So that's something. Now, as far as what the Falcons should do at quarterback, they should just play Ridder the rest of the year, right? Because at this point, like, you already know what you're having Heineke. Putting Heineke in was supposed to win the games against the teams that weren't any good, like the Vikings without Kirk Cousins and the 1-8 Arizona Cardinals, and he couldn't deliver that for you, right? So he's failed at the job that you've acquired him for, Heineke, right? So the next best thing is to play Ridder, figure out what you have in him. You likely don't have a ton left in him, but he's the guy. But there were some glimmers of hope for the Falcons Sunday. They gave the ball to Bijan Robinson. I thought Drake London was pretty solid. Dan Bodine said it was 4.2 win probability, so he lost 4% to win that game on that play. I'm also thinking about, like, when the Arizona tight end caught the ball inside the 10, you got to push him into the end zone so you can get the ball back. Like, what are you doing, holding him up, taking seconds off the clock? Like, that has to be part of it too, right? Like,
and to Arizona's credit, time is of the essence, right? On the other side, the fact that they got creative and, kept running the timeout. I mean, one could argue that, Ridder getting anxious, trying to get in as much as he can, leaving with 2:33 left on the clock. I've been there before, by the way. This is not a judgment on Arthur Smith or anyone it's an organizational discussion, right? When defensive coordinators send the message, and people don't like to hear this, we need 2.5 minutes or 2.20 minutes to march down the field and get a real legit opportunity. If we score right away, or if we fiddle around a little bit, not fiddle around, but if we manage our time, run, do this, do that, keep it going, and try to chip off the clock, that's what you have to do. And sometimes, I saw it, sometimes you let a guy in so you get the damn ball back in your hands so you have 2:33, and you don't. I mean, I'm not saying they let Ritter in, but I'm saying they were creative with it, and they're like, let's get the ball in our hands and see what we can do. And I think that's important. I think it's a really important thought to decide.
Well, and I think that's what you do when you put processes in place to have the rest of the thing figured out. Like let's talk briefly about the Lions, because I want to actually, and I sent you and Scott a message about this because I think it dovetails to the Falcons thing, right? So let's connect this up.
Yeah.
The Lions, with a little over 2 minutes, or I think a little under 2 minutes left in the game, were a tie game, and a game that they had led by 14, a game where they had done a lot of fourth down conversions, a lot of just really aggressive, a lot of confident football, right? They get in, and they've gotten caught from behind. Justin Herbert played a phenomenal game, like threw over 400 yards, all these touchdowns. But most importantly, he took his team from down 14 to tied. Yeah. Lions get the ball back. They drive the length of the field. They're stuck with a 4th and 2. Not a 4th and inches, not a 4th and 1, 4th and 2. And they're like, okay, we could give the ball, we could kick a field goal, longer field goal. Whether or not it goes in, who knows? We could kick a field goal and go up 3 and give the ball back to one of the best quarterbacks in football and pray, hope and pray that we get a stop. Or I'm going to put this game in the hands of my $30 million quarterback and my 2nd-round pick tight end and my offensive line. By the way, Jared Goff did not get hit once yesterday. The stats did not get hit once by Los Angeles defense. Take a step back, complete the ball, run the clock down, kick a game-winning field goal, get out of Los Angeles with a win, 7-2, 1 game out of the 1 seed in the NFC, right? And I think about that, right? And I think about all the things you need as an NFL team to get to that point. If you're Dan Campbell, if you're Brad Holmes, if you're the people that built this team, you have assistant coaches that you respect and you trust. Ben Johnson's calling that offensive play. Aaron Glenn's calling the defense. The special teams are phenomenal, all this stuff. You have motivation, right? Your coach is clearly one of the best motivators in all of football. You have that down. You have every letter of the alphabet span. And so when you get to a fork in the road where almost every other coach would make the other decision, you have the time and the faculties to think it through and convert it and end a team like that. What we just talked about, Thomas, was in the rare case that a tight end gets deep on you inside the 5-yard line, you push him into the end zone, you overcome your instincts to tackle him. Like, those things aren't thought about when teams are kind of on the edge of competence. And I mean this again, I don't mean this in a dicky way, but when a team is on the edge of competence, when they're just trying to fight it out to get confidence and get wins and all this stuff, they're not thinking about those 3rd and 4th order things. They're just doing, right? And we come up for air and we're like, what were they thinking? It's like, they weren't thinking, right? They had to think about the scheme and all this other stuff. They have to worry about whether they're going to trot Desmond Ritter or Taylor Heineke out of quarterback. They don't have the time. The Lions, and we know Jared Goff's kind of a midliner. We know all this stuff. But whatever the Lions are, they are. And they're full speed ahead. And so that their coach can actually look at the boundaries of the game and call a special play for that particular time. And the Patriots have been that way forever. Everybody wonders about, why are they lining up Shane Vereen at right tackle against the Ravens in the playoffs? It's like, because they got everything. They've aced the rest of football. Now they can think about the extra credit stuff, right?
Yeah.
In a weird way, the Lions have aced football right now, taking a team from the 3-13 to, the 2 seed in the NFC right now. And so that they can, winning breeds winning type of plays on teams like the Chargers. And I watched that and I'm just thinking, I'm like very happy for that franchise because they've gone from, as far as the coach has really emerged from a person that people really weren't buying into to somebody who can, make a call like that in the other games.
So my head is going to, it's not the same. We didn't come from as far back, but Dan Quinn, when he came to the Atlanta Falcons, it took him 3 years to get to the Super Bowl. Are you saying that Dan Campbell is in the same line as Dan Quinn as far as pure quality of coach? And do you think he has a chance to get to the Super Bowl in year 3?
It's different. Dan Campbell is not going to, if Dan Campbell loses his job as the head coach of the Lions, he's not going to go somewhere and be an A+ coordinator the same way that Dan Quinn did.
Good point.
I think that Campbell is much more in that Mike Tomlin realm where I think that the leadership qualities are all there. I think Dan Quinn's a brilliant defensive mind who was also a good head coach. And so I think it's different. I do think the Lions can make the Super Bowl because we have them as a 12.6% chance to get the 1 seed and a bye. There's a really good chance they face the team that wins the NFC South if they get the bye, which that team's not going to be very good, as we talked about. And so you really have one game against maybe the Eagles, Cowboys, or 49ers to go to the Super Bowl. And in a game like that, anything can happen. Now, I think Dan Quinn, it's so to your point, what happens to the Lions when Ben Johnson gets a head coaching job? What happens when Aaron Glenn gets a head coaching job? What happens when he's got to find another really good coordinator? That's an open question, right? And I think that's part of the difficulty. But I think currently right now, as far as a CEO type head coach, I think Dan Campbell's quite good. I would not trade a first round pick for him, but I think he's growing into that role incredibly well.
Since I've been on the hot seat many, many years, I'm going to put you on a different hot seat.
Uh-oh.
Can Jared Goff, when the shit hits the fan and they get to the Super Bowl, hypothetically, can he handle that? Wouldn't that be a great story? That many years later, after the Rams trade, the Rams get their Super Bowl, and he comes back. Can he do that? Does he have the makeup to do that?
I think he does. I mean, they were down 13-0 in New Orleans in the conference title game. And now I know he shit himself in the Super Bowl against Bill. But the game before, right, against a very good Saints team. Now, there was some help with the officials not calling the pass interference and all that stuff. But he was phenomenal in that game. And they got behind. He was nails. He really did the thing that game. So yes, he can. If he's in a Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes, would I bet a cent on Jared Goff? No way. There's probably not a price you could give me that I'd bet on Goff. But is it possible? Yeah. Especially now where.
Wait, my friend. As smart as you are, I want some backing on this. I'm putting you in a spot.
So
there's a chance. There's this much, but can he do it when the crap hits the fan and it is tough and it is dusty? And there's all kinds of pressures, and he starts getting some badass pressure from some of these big-time teams. We haven't even dug into the teams they played when he's thrived and not. I would love to see that. I'm only curious because I want to know from an analytic standpoint.
I think if you can – so yesterday Jared Goff was not hit. Jared Goff's splits, pressured and non-pressured, are as wide as any quarterback in the NFL. Also, Goff struggles with, I call them even coverages, which is like quarters and six and stuff like that. He's much better against man. He's much better against cover 3. So if he catches a team like that, like the Patriots, who ran almost no cover 4 and then ran all cover 4 in that Super Bowl, and you have somebody who's brilliant, he's going to get taken down 100%. We are looking at the league page right now. The Lions, by the way, have the 5th highest Super Bowl odds, behind only the Ravens, Niners, Eagles, and Chiefs. A lot of that is structural. Dallas is just below them because Dallas probably won't win their own division. But I would say yes, he can. But here's the deal: you have to be in a position where you can protect him. And yesterday, that defensive line for the Chargers has a Bosa, it has Khalil Mack, and they did not touch him. If he isn't touched, I think he can be competent. Like, because his issues are not clean pocket misses. He's under pressure and he starts throwing picks, right? And so if he played Buffalo, other than Von Miller, doesn't have a great pass rush. If they play the Dolphins, I think the Dolphins with Wilkins and Chubb and Jalen Phillips can pressure him. But like, it's really going to be matchup dependent. If they play the Chiefs, I don't know. I mean, Chris Jones being back and Karlaftis is one of the league leaders in pressures and all that stuff. It's going to be tough. Can he? Yes. I think that the big issue is going to be, can he face a team? Can he luck into facing a team that won't put as much pressure on him? Because I think if he does, like, they're very, very good on offense and they support him really well. And he drives the car. He would be an outlier in terms of Super Bowl winners as a guy who is being supported as opposed to being the main guy on a team, for sure. I think that's 100% true.
So I've made this comment before that I think Brett Veach is in a fantastic spot, and I think he's a top-notch GM, albeit still fairly young, even though he'll argue with me he's not as young as I give him credit. But I've always said the GM, when you have the trifecta, right, top-notch owner, one of the very best in Kansas City, head coach and quarterback. When you're looking at Detroit, and we're talking about the GM again, Brad Holmes, right? He's doing a heck of a job as it's gone these 3 years, right? He's got a head coach who's considered upper echelon, I'm not saying top 10, or 8 or 5, or I'm just saying upper echelon, right? Leads very well, knows how to surround himself. Ownership, longtime owner, I'm saying ownership family. Mm-hmm. Okay. But then the last and most, quite honestly, important piece is Jared Goff a top tier quarterback?
He's not.
Is he a top 10? Just answer one yes or no.
No.
Is he a top 13?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So
wow. Like, okay. But so here, good questions. I think the problem is like, is he a top 10 quarterback 3 years ago? No. Nowadays, though, Cousins hurt, Tom Brady retired, Big Ben retired, Phillip Rivers retired, Drew Brees retired. There's not that many good quarterbacks in the NFL. It's a weird situation. So to back your point up about the Chiefs, that means if you have a team with a real good quarterback, you got the league by the balls, right? That's where Brett Veach and Kansas City are. But like, let's actually look at this again. Let's bring this up. I bring up this thing because I really want to because I'm also like tethering this to the conference. So let's look at the different conferences. Is Jared Goff better?
Where are my quarterbacks up on this?
Okay, I was just going to go by teams and who their quarterback is, but let's just go with quarterback. Okay, so we go by total EPA. Allen's in the AFC. Mahomes in the AFC. Stroud's in the AFC. Tua, Herbert are all in the AFC. Lamar Jackson's in the AFC. Let's look at the other guys. Like, is Purdy is like in a very good situation.
Wait, Jared Goff with 68.2, right? Is that his percentage? 68?
Yeah.
Gosh.
No, he's right here. Yep.
I thought I saw Stafford's 59. I'm like, whoa, that was one below.
Well, that is what Stafford has been a wild child this year, although it's been kind of fun. But he has thrown a decent amount of picks, and it's not been that efficient. Yeah.
Okay.
But like when I look at this, like quarterbacks who are currently healthy and in the NFC, who would you take over Goff? Prescott and Hurts, certainly. Yeah. After that, it gets kind of dicey, right? Geno Smith.
Gets dicey.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, I agree, 5 years ago when you were going against Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, like in the NFC alone, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, Russell Wilson in Seattle, like, I would give him much less of a chance. But in this current NFC, like, Dak Prescott has a 4-interception game in him in the playoffs. What if that happens in Detroit? That's kind of that's like my whole thesis is like to win in the NFC doesn't actually take great quarterback play.
Great rebut. Way to work through your intelligentsia. And I appreciate it.
I agree with you though. And I do think that I get nervous, especially with him playing outdoors. Now, they have the Detroit Lions, and again, this is part of it. Detroit has one more outdoor game all year.
Yeah.
And Goff has always been a bad cold weather guy, but they have a road game in Dallas, a road game in New Orleans, a road game in Minnesota, and then they have all home games except for a road game in Chicago, who, is an inferior team to them. Like, I think that, obviously anything could happen, but they could go. They could get a good seed and then never have to play in a cold weather game in the playoffs and then the Super Bowl is in a dome. So
before we go, because I know we're getting close, you presented a thought to me, and I didn't know if we're going to get there, but I want to circle back around. Do not mean to be jumping around like this, but you said, "Is Bill Belichick losing his steam?" I think that's how you worded it. Is that correct?
I mean, I don't think I said that on air, but I'm certain. Like,
no,
yes. Is Bill Belichick? Are we seeing the last year of Philadelphia Andy Reid? Is maybe the question I'll say.
No, I want to answer the question first of all. I do not in any way think we're seeing Bill Belichick run out of steam in football in general. I really don't. I think maybe that's 22 or 23 years in one place, right?
Yep.
You heard Bill Polian saying after 10 years, any GM or head coach should be fired. I disagreed with it when I was in my 12th year because I'm like, no, I think we can prolong this to 15, 22 years with the same ownership group, of course, with massive, egos in the sense of it all, right? It's very complicated. So I think new place, new location, renewed. Let's hone in on. I've said it before. No, I think he can go toe to toe with anyone, and I think if there's one coach out there that comes available, Bill Belichick is the person who's going to get teams out in the NFL who need a coach and want to win a Super Bowl. He's the guy that gets them there in 3 years over anyone else available right now. Now, you tell me who the other guys that would vie for that.
Who are available? I don't think. I mean, I threw this out here because I interact with a decent amount of through my writing and obviously this podcast. We have a ton of loyal listeners. By the way, we're setting a record today for the number of people watching live, Thomas. So that's really good.
Good. Yep.
I think Sean McDermott, when you factor in age and you factor in effectiveness, is the only one that comes close. And I don't even think he comes that close as far as guys that are available. But to my point earlier, and again, this hopefully gives you comfort because you've watched your former team, the Falcons, the last 3 years, kind of every single Sunday kind of revealed that like there was more going on there than just Thomas Dimitroff. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes to your point about, there just needs to be change for change's sake. And I think that in the case, for example, with Andy Reid, that last year with the Eagles was really bad. 4-12, like a 10-game losing streak, all this stuff. He goes to Kansas City and they win 9. That was a 2-win team that won 9 straight games coming out of the jump, have never had a losing season. I agree with you. But the one part I have an issue with the whole Belichick thing is we do have to acknowledge that it's going poorly in New England. Like that's the one thing I don't think people really want to, like, the bridge no one wants to cross, which is to say acknowledge freely. It's not going well there. And maybe a change is good for Bill is kind of maybe the point. And to the previous analogy I tried to make is Andy, when he got let go by the Eagles, was hired by the Chiefs in like a day or two and just kept changed himself a little bit, moved on. The same thing probably would be true about Belichick. The one question I have before we go, and I know we got to get going. what GM would be willing to trade his or her assets to acquire a coach who I think we're all in agreement here would have significant power, maybe not over that GM, but in concert with. It would be an awkward situation, right? Like if you're a GM and you're making this trade, you're either a lame duck guy or you have to humble yourself significantly, which wouldn't be as bad because it's Belichick and how amazing he is, but it is a good question, right? Like what GM would step in front of that bus?
Okay, I have a strong feeling about it. A GM who's in his third or fourth year, who's gaining some ground and has some growing cachet, no way. A GM that can pull his owner aside and say, Mr. Owner, I literally think that I'm going to put my own ego aside. I'm going to put my own comfort level aside, meaning comfort level in the sense of like being able to run the show, walk around, I got to be careful what I say here, but walk around slinging it around like you're the dude. You can put it aside, and I'm going to tell the owner, if this is going to help me parlay this into 2 and 3 more contracts, this is my feeling, right? This is what we need to do for the team, for the betterment of the team, is to bring someone in like Bill, and it has to be the right fit. I get it. I mean, some people couldn't do it. The GM that's out there that knows they're on enough of a hot seat. If the owner's going to say you're going to stay around, you're going to be the number 2 in the organization, and you're going to do all your part to help Bill Belichick grow this team, help where you need to help on the personnel side, because more than likely that GM is going to have legitimate personnel ability for Bill, if hypothetically for someone like Bill to come in there and say, this is who I want in here with me, right? I want a personnel man who knows it through and through, who can give me good guidance and leadership on building a football team, right? But again, you have to have someone that has a lot of confidence at this point in their career.
Well, and I think this gets back to the whole example of Randall Cunningham, which is like for some people, it might be a relief. It might be a relief where you've cut your teeth evaluating, you've cut your teeth in the case of like Kwesi, building models and all this stuff. And now that you're in that chair, it's a ton of things to think about. And if you bring somebody in who can supplement you in that way, it's probably a relief in some ways. And so I do think that there are probably more people, men or women, that would be willing to do that than I would have guessed a priori. So that's a good answer.
And can I just say too, all of that said, and all of my ramble there, because I think there are nuances to that GM who's going to be the incumbent, and they're like, all right, I'm going to pull aside. I'm going to let Bill Belichick, who is the best in the history of this league, modern time. There's only 2 others, as we know, out there, right? Paul Brown and Vince Lombardi. At least that's arguable. That's what a lot of people are saying. Bill Belichick is going as the dude wherever he goes. There's no mistake about that. And if there's not a comfort level in that person, who that person is, and quite honestly, they don't have ties to the Patriot paradigm, that's a complicated thing, right? Bill doesn't have time, in my mind, I'm not speaking for him, but to come in there, or nor does an owner, to fiddle around for 2 years to see if something is going to work. That owner is bringing him in to help him win a Super Bowl now. Mm-hmm. And if that means Mr. GM who's already in there, and it means moving on, then so be it. Why are you smirking? You're
well, the reason I'm smirking is because 2 really good candidate teams for that, 3 candidate teams for that are actually in their division. Like if he went to Buffalo, right? Let's just say a team that's been on the doorstep for 3-4 years. Brandon Beane's one of the best at what he does. Sean McDermott's one of the best at what he does. But much like Tony Dungy was one of the best at what he did, and it took John Gruden to win a Super Bowl in Tampa Bay. Sometimes that is required, right? I'm thinking through teams in my head for which this applies, right? He's not going to go to Atlanta. He's not going to go and I'm just speculating. He's not going to go somewhere that needs a little bit of a rebuild. He wants to go somewhere that's going to win a Super Bowl quickly. and has the goods, because that's obviously what, at this point in his career, that's what he has time for. The Jets are a team that you watch that team and you think he would be like, do you think he would deal with the quarterback situation that they have currently? Like, it's just, it was funny to me to think about the teams that kind of fit that profile and realize that like they're like the Patriots wouldn't trade him to any of those teams. And it makes me kind of laugh.
Well, don't be surprised. I mean, look, I've said this before, and I will definitely say it again. As the season moves on, even though a lot of these owners, as you know, early in the tenure of certain coaches, and I won't pinpoint this, but you all can put your minds on it, all you football followers in the NFL. There are head coaches out there that have just lauded their coaches early on and lauded them during some of the losses and ups and downs. All of a sudden, that owner is faced with an opportunity to get one of the very best ever. It doesn't matter to that owner if he goes against what he's saying. Like, I didn't think Bill Belichick was going to be available, hypothetically speaking, right? I'm sorry. I know I told you 100%. I love you, and we're going to be together and make a nice run on this. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, this is an opportunity. Doesn't mean because they switch, they're dishonest or they're a horse's ass because they go against what they've been talking about. It's like, I have to do what's best for this organization. Who gets an opportunity to have one of the very best? And
yeah, it doesn't come up very often, and that's why Romeo Crennel was a 1-year coach for the Chiefs because Andy Reid was available. Like, all this kind of stuff happens. Yeah, and to rebut my own point, the Jets did trade like draft picks to the Patriots for not only Bill Parcells but also Curtis Martin, and that that did happen before, and both teams lived to talk about it. So. By the way, Bill Belichick, twice the head coach of the Jets, never coached a game for them, is still like the best stat of all time. And I know that you guys have, you and Scott have all the like kind of those connections there. Although you were never a part of the Jets, right? Like, it was always, you were kind of doing you were kind of, that was the late 90s when you were messing around with, being a Detroit Lion, right?
No, look, the only reason that I ended up with Bill and Scott was because of Scott's push early on. And then, of course, as you're around Bill in that situation, you grow, and he's a loyalty guy, and he wants people that are going to put their asses on the line as a player, management, or coaches. So I think they realize over time, Scott and Bill as a partnership, that they wanted people that were of like mind at certain levels. We don't have time to get into it. Why have certain guys been strategically successful coming out of that group, and why not? It's obviously for another discussion. So.
Yeah, and we'll have plenty of time because we're a few months away from that. But I thought this was a great podcast. We do cover the league like no one else does. We appreciate all of you, the increasingly big audience that we're getting live on, especially Mondays. Thank you. Continue to tell people 3:00 every Monday ish. If Thomas and I don't have a million things to talk about beforehand. And make sure that you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, send a review in. Somebody on the review said I say right too much, which is a new one. I normally say like too much. So I am going to try to be a little bit better there with my what I'll call throwaway words. We all have a few of those. So for Thomas Dimitroff, for Eric Eager, this has been the Sumer Sports Show.